Hey guys, welcome back to the return of my political discussion videos. In this discussion video, I'm going to be sharing my ideas on reforming the Electoral College. But before I begin discussing my system of how I would reform it, I want to first talk about how the Electoral College became such a big issue in the 21st century. So I think the reason why it really became this big of an issue is because of the 2000 presidential election, where Al Gore lost the presidential election to George W. Bush, despite him receiving more votes in the national popular vote. And plus, the same thing happened in 2016 again, where Donald Trump won the presidential election because of the Electoral College, but still lost the popular vote by 3 million more votes to Hillary Clinton. Um, and since then, there have been some advocates who want to simply abolish the Electoral College and replace it with the national popular vote, like the former Democratic presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren, who wants to propose a constitutional amendment to effectively get rid of the Electoral College. Why you can do that? It's really hard to amend the Constitution because you need two-thirds in each House of Congress, or also a national convention called by Congress at the request of two-thirds of the state legislature to amend the U.S. Constitution. There's also another. There is also another way that some states are going about it, and that is through the National Interstate Compact. And so far, 16 states like California, plus the District of Columbia, have signed on to pledge their electors to the winner of the national popular vote. So far, the compact only has 196 electoral votes, but still needs 270 electoral votes to implement the compact. And advocates that argue for a national popular vote says it will make everyone's vote count equally. And Republican voters in blue states and Democratic voters in red states will now matter also and have more power in our elections. While supporters of the Electoral College says it gives big and small states equal voting power and making sure candidates are campaigning, making sure they're not ignoring big or small states. And they argue that with a national popular vote, candidates will only be going to the highest population areas in the country to only rack up the large amount of votes so they can win an election easily, thus leaving rural voters feeling that they might not have a voice in the election because of the that type of advantage of a national popular vote. Because candidates, they would say, they would just go to the bigger areas and the most populated areas to win an election. While I understand the advocates of replacing the Electoral College with the National Popular, I believe the Electoral College should be reformed into a proportional method and thus get rid of the winner-take-all forms of voting under the current system. Simply because I just think with a national popular vote, candidates are just going to just be only focused on campaigning in the most popular areas to help them to give them an advantage to win. And plus, the most popular areas are heavily a lot more Democratic, and Democrat lean very Democratic. So I just think it's going to put more of an advantage to the Democratic Party. While under a proportional electoral college, which I am completely for. Electoral votes are allocated proportionally based on the percentages each candidate got in the state's popular vote. But a candidate still needs 15% support to win an electoral vote in any state. Plus, the proportional electoral college idea is also supported by the former Democratic presidential candidate Andrew Yang, since under a proportional system, presidential candidates' incentives change, where they will be now campaigning everywhere in all 50 states, not just a handful of battleground states like under our current system. Since under this new system, there will be no more safe states for particular parties or candidates, and they'll now be able to campaign everywhere. And Republican voters and Democratic voters in blue states and red states will all matter now because Republican candidates, since California is a very for instance, like California, since it's a very heavily Democratic state, um, the Republicans can still campaign in California to try to maybe campaign really hard there so they can crack 15% and get some electoral votes on election day. Overall, I believe a proportional electoral college is the best way to reform the electoral college altogether, since it will now get candidates to campaign in all 50 states and reach out to every type of voter. And now let's talk about my idea on reforming the electoral college. But here's a video from the Fair Vote organization that helped me develop this new electoral college system idea.
Use a ranked choice ballot this year to determine how many delegates each presidential candidate will receive, giving voters more power in their elections. Ranked choice voting allows you to rank your favorite candidates instead of choosing just one. To vote, you rank your favorite candidate as number 1, then your second favorite as number 2, and so on. If your first choice candidate has limited support, your next choice will be counted to ensure your vote is not wasted. Let's see how this will work with our candidates. After all the ballots are in, only first choices are counted. Any candidate that has at least 15% of the first choice votes will automatically earn delegates. Sonia Sunflower and Chloe Carnation have more than 15%, so they'll win some delegates. If after counting all first choices, some candidates have not received 15% of the vote, the candidate with the fewest first choices is eliminated. In this case, that candidate is Richard Rose. Richard Rose is now eliminated, and the voters who chose Mr. Rose as their favorite will have their votes count for their next choice. As it turns out, most voters who preferred Richard Rose chose Sonia Sunflower, Chloe Carnation, and Oliver Orchid as their next choices, and a few chose the remaining candidates. Now, Oliver Orchid has also reached the 15% threshold. For the final ranking, we repeat the process again. In the end, we have 4 candidates who received the most support from Kansas primary voters. Sonia Sunflower is the clear favorite with 39% of the vote, Chloe Carnation comes in second with 26%, Oliver Orchid earns 19%, and Demi Daisy with 16%. Candidates will earn their proportional share of delegates based on the percentage that each candidate received in the final round of the total tally.
As the Fair Vote video put it, my idea would introduce a ranked choice voting ballot to my proportional electoral college, where voters will rank their candidates in order of choice, and the candidates who get 15% of the vote in any state will get an electoral vote. In your respective state, they will first count the first choice candidates that you selected as number 1, and if some candidates reach a 15% threshold, they will win some electoral votes. But as Fair Vote put it in their video, after counting voters' first choice, if some candidates did not receive 15% of the vote, then the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated. And the voters that selected that candidate as number 1 will have their second choices counted, and that's when the start of round 2 of the vote tabulation begins. The process in multiple rounds of vote tabulations will keep continuing until you end up with a proportional result, with multiple candidates getting an electoral vote in the state's popular vote, in any of the state's popular vote. The only difference with Fair Vote's video is that under my proportional electoral college, instead of having 1 vote, voters in all states have 2 votes. But before I explain, let me show you what a ballot will look like under this system. On the left side of the ballot, this will be your first vote, where you rank the candidates in order of preference. As the video put it again earlier, they first count your first choice votes. And if some candidates received 15% support in any state, they will earn some electoral votes. And if there's still some candidates who still don't have 15% of the vote in the state's popular vote, that's when it will trigger the second round, where the candidates with the fewest votes is eliminated, and those voters that select that candidate as number 1 will have their second choices counted. The multiple tabulation of votes will keep continuing until you end up with a proportional result in any of the state's popular vote. And at this point, you all might be asking me, what happens if one candidate that has the most electoral votes fails to get a majority in the Electoral College, 270 or more electoral votes? Does the vote go to the House of Representatives and to the Senate to elect the Vice President? Well, no. Under this system, this is where your second vote comes in. That will appear on the right side of the ballot, where you repeat the same voting process in your first vote. You rank the same candidates that you listed in your first vote in order of choice. Keep in mind, your second choice will only be counted if neither candidate has a majority in the Electoral College. Once your second vote does start being counted, the candidate with the fewest electoral votes will be eliminated from the race, and those voters that selected that candidate as number 1 will have their next choices counted. Multiple voter tabulations or rounds will keep continuing until one candidate gets a majority in the Electoral College, 270 or more. For instance, let's just say in the 2016 presidential election that there was a proportional electoral college. Under this scenario, they're already finished counting through multiple rounds of tabulations through your proportional first vote. And as you see, neither candidate received a majority in the electoral college. Both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are tied in first place with 268 electoral votes. Now we will move over to your second vote and start counting it through multiple rounds of tabulations, where we will eliminate the candidate being the independent candidate, Evan McMullin, that only has 2 electoral votes from the state of Utah. And voters who selected Evan McMullin in Utah first in their second vote will have their second choices counted. and his 2 electoral votes are redistributed. We now run the tally again, and it's a drum roll. Evan McMullen's 2 electoral votes out of Utah are redistributed to Donald Trump, effectively putting him at the 270 electoral votes to be elected the 45th president of the United States of America. But most of all, under my proportional electoral college system, it will eliminate safe and red blue states and allow more choices to voters. Candidates will have that incentive to now camping everywhere and in all 50 states, persuading all voters to vote for you, rather than just camping in a handful of battleground states like the Rust Belt, Florida, North Carolina, Ohio, Texas, Arizona. That's under our current system. And also it'll give more power to you because now you can vote for the candidate you feel like is the best to hold the office of to hold the highest office in the land, which is the presidency. So let's together now reimagine the electoral college once again. So I hope you guys enjoyed and share your thoughts on my electoral college system in the comment section below. But until next time, guys, this is the Young Centrist, and I am out.